All right. Uh, this is the first video for the mechanical power transmission units. The learning goals for this unit, I want you to be able to discuss the different types of gears. I want you to be able to describe the relationship between pitch, tooth count, and diameter of a gear. I want you to be able to calculate the mechanical advantage of a gear system. And I want you to be able to describe the purpose of an idler gear. So let's get started. Power transmission. Basically, what this is the transfer of energy from where it is stored to where it must do work. So for us, it's going from the battery to the wheels. And if we think about it, that means that the energy must go through the motor, the gears, and the axles just to get to the wheels. So the energy has to go through several steps just to get from the battery to the wheels. In industry, and obviously we have to talk about drive shafts. In industry, there are many different types of drive shafts. Um, we have some with keyways, we have spline shafts and hexagonal shafts. In the VEX system, we use square drive shafts. Now, this is why it is very important to use a bearing. We must use a bearing because on the metal pieces of structure, the holes are square. So if you have a square hole with a square drive shaft, what can happen is that if you put a lot of weight or a lot of force on that drive shaft, it's going to pin itself against one of the square holes and it won't be able to turn. So we have to make sure we use those bearings every time a drive shaft goes through um, one of the square holes. Now, another thing we have to talk about then are gears, because gears help us go from the motor to the wheels. Now, the first type we have here is a spur gear. This is the most common. This is what we have. They're pretty handy. When it comes to motion, they transfer motion between parallel drive shafts. So imagine that we have a drive shaft here and a drive shaft here. And if we have a motor, kind of a weird looking motor, and then we would have a wheel right here. So what this can do is it can transfer between two parallel drive shafts. The next type are the bevel gears. And these transfer motion between perpendicular drive shafts. So imagine that we have a drive shaft coming through here and a drive shaft through here. Now, something you do have to be careful when you use these, there's a place where the drive shafts can hit each other, so make sure that you, if you use bevel gears, that you use your shaft collars to prevent that. The next type we have are the crown gears. These are a type of bevel. Once again, these will transfer motion between two perpendicular shafts. So imagine that we have a drive shaft here and here. And again, just like with the bevel gears, make sure that there's this area where drive shafts could interfere with each other. Make sure that you use your shaft collars so that you don't have to worry about that. The next type is the warm gear. And the warm gear works with just a regular old spur gear. And with the warm gear, once again, it transfers between perpendicular shafts. But notice, excuse me, notice that this drive shaft, the perpendicular part, looks a little different than what we've seen. We do not have to worry about the drive shafts interfering with each other. So they're perpendicular, but they do not intersect. Warm gears typically have a very high mechanical advantage. And what this means is that they only work one way. You have to put your motor on the warm gear. If you put a motor on the spur gear, it will not turn the warm gear. That's typically what happens when you have very high mechanical advantage. They only work one way. So you can think of this as a really handy little brake. When the motor's turned off, and if you have a wheel, on the spur gear, this will act as a brake for you. The wheel will not be able to turn that warm gear. But since it has such a high mechanical advantage, it's going to be slow. So if this motor is turning at 100 RPMs, that wheel is going to be spinning at very, very, very less than 100 RPMs. Next one we come to are helical gears. These ones are kind of neat. Basically, they're very similar to spur. And notice that they can transfer motion between perpendicular drive shafts or non-intersecting, parallel shafts or non-intersecting perpendicular shafts. The next type, these ones are kind of fun. These are called planetary gears. And what's nice about these is that any gear in here can be used as an input. What I mean by that is you can attach a motor to any gear. You can attach it to the sun gear, you can attach it to any one of the planetary gears, or the ring gear. You can put the motor on any one of those. A typical configuration will be to have a plate attached to the planetary gears. You see planetary gears a lot used in those differentials in cars. All right, the final type we have here is called the rack gears. Usually we call it rack and pinion. This is the type of gear system that's used in your car for steering, believe it or not. And what's kind of cool about these is it'll convert rotational motion into linear motion. So if you need to have something that slides in or out, you can use a rack and pinion to do that for you. All right, that concludes video one.